Hello, and welcome back to the Agati Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different architects, designers, and industry thought leaders to help educate you in your work. My name is Joe Agati, and I'm the COO and Director of Design here at Agati Furniture. For today's episode of the podcast, I have the opportunity to talk with Derrick Choi, Regional Aviation Leader at Gensler. Derrick is an award-winning architect and infrastructure planning professional with 2 decades of experience working on challenging international aviation, transportation, infrastructure, and public space projects in Asia, North America, Europe, and Middle East. He previously founded and led the Americans Aviation practice at Populous from 2014 to 2018. Derrick, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Likewise, Joe. It's been a while. Thanks for the opportunity. Excited to be here and talk shop about all things interesting in aviation and transportation.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you. Long intro. Done a lot of stuff, looks like. You're just that accomplished.
Well, it's been an exciting ride, but we'll keep that part brief. But it's
Yeah, well, usually like to start off just to get some background on you, kind of how you've gotten to where you are today.
Awesome. So I want to thank you again for this invitation to talk about trends and developments in our business. So on behalf of Gensler, I'm honored to be talking to you today. We're a large global architecture, design, and planning firm with 53 locations, 7,000 professionals around the world, and we have about 29 practice areas in our firm, including aviation, of course. And what really gets us excited is the scale and the impact of our work and how we can truly make a difference, whichever sector we're in. So, going back to how I ended up here, I have to say that architecture, Joe, has always been my lifelong passion, right? But I'm going to, for full disclosure, tell you all that aviation was my first love.
Cool.
As my family is from Hong Kong, and I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. My extended family spread out nicely around the Pacific Rim. So for me, the aircraft has always been an integral part of my life, right? I've been on a plane since I was a toddler. So, later in life, when I started high school, I had the opportunity to join my school's Civil Air Patrol Squadron. And let me describe this as sort of an Air Force ROTC program.
Yeah, I know Civil Air Patrol.
Oh, there you go.
I have a background in aviation. I'm a pilot.
There you go. Excellent.
Yeah. That's
what a
cool.
small world. What a small world. So for me, the aviation bug hit me fast, and it really bit me hard. And I think for us early on, cadets in my high school squadron were exposed to GA. For those who are not aware of general aviation, on our weekend trainings on gliders and single-engine propeller aircraft. Yeah. And that really, Joe, as you know, being out there in that environment, it really transforms your perspective of how airports operate. Mm-hmm. So, again, what a delight to know that you are a pilot.
Yeah. Did you get your rating? Any ratings while?
No, I actually did not. Unfortunately, I did not. So the story continues. So fast forward. I go to college and still have these sort of aviation memories fresh in my mind. And I go to Columbia University in the great city of New York City, where I was convinced. I tell you, Joe, I was convinced I was going to spend the rest of my life designing cool towers and urban mixed-use developments in New York City. And upon wrapping up my undergraduate studies, I went straight to graduate school, where I was selected for a summer internship in the New York office of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. So on my first day reporting to work, I was immediately informed of the bad news that the super cool, super tall tower in Sao Paulo was canceled due to all of the indeterminacies with the financial and civil unrest in Brazil. And the good news, they told me, in 1997 was that there's this incredible batch of aviation projects that I could jump right into. And it was, I would say I reluctantly said yes. got into the business, and my career literally took off from there. So it was really a game-changing opportunity for me. So that was that's my aviation story. And since then, I've had a chance to work on 30 plus aviation projects
Mm-hmm.
with 3 dozen municipalities, developers, agencies, as well as airlines. So I feel like I've been really fortunate to be able to see various aspects of aviation design, ranging from lounges to mega facilities to something as let's say mundane as a GA facility or a fixed base operator. So it's been a real pleasure to be in this business, and I'm excited because it is, as they say, you see an airport, you've only seen one airport.
True. Very true. So where did your passion for architecture in general come from?
Yeah, architecture for me was something that I've always felt, as an immigrant, my parents would always tell me that, as guests in this country, you've got to make this place better when you found it. And, for me, that was something that I attribute very much to my high school AP art instructor, Ms. Young, who let me go crazy on all medium. And the high school really forged a path for me that was the intersection of the arts and the sciences, and I felt like architecture was something that was a very natural evolution coming from my very simple high school passions. And I would say that it really kind of came to the forefront, going back to the earlier story about being told, hey, you get to work on an airport, and that was really when it all came together, realizing that there was a pathway, to combine your passions in aviation as well as the practice of architecture. So that was for me that discovery, and since then, I feel like I've had this great opportunity to be in the civic realm, and most of my projects, while they've been largely transportation and aviation, I've also been fortunate to work on sports facilities and some mixed use complexes. And in some ways, I've always seen the airport, and we say this within our practice area, it's kind of like a really tall, large mixed use building. You just turn on its side, right? You just turn on its side and suddenly it all comes together. So for me, I think architecture and aviation is just a really exciting blend of these sort of very complex, very robust infrastructure elements that are gateways, that are also incredibly complex and programmatically rich because there are so many components, right? From the sort of really sort of no nonsense industrial all the way to the really elegant and bespoke lounge spaces. At the end of the day, I do feel like going back to your question of how I became passionate in architecture is that we really feel like what we do really makes a huge difference in the built environment, right? And particularly in my practice, where we do feel like we do connect worlds, literally, right? And with through architecture and design, you're really helping curate a statement, for your community. And to me, that intersection of these sort of diversity of practice offerings, complexity of infrastructure, and the ability to really make a statement for a community and contribute to a community is a really exciting part about what we do in our business.
Yeah, really interesting, really good kind of path on how you kind of got here. You definitely can sense the passion for what you're doing and for airports. It's interesting. I never heard the airport mixed use space turned on its side, but that makes sense. It's definitely, especially nowadays, and I guess that kind of leads into where I wanted to go next, is talking about trends. I mean, the airport from 10, 15 years ago has definitely evolved and changed in trends, especially coming through COVID. So I guess I'd love to get your perspective on current trends, what you see kind of for the future going in the aviation world.
Yeah, no, I think there's a funny thing that I always tell people, I was once, in my younger days, I was asked, Joe, what kind of trends do I follow? And I told this client, I said, I generally don't follow trends, and I create trends.
There you go.
But now that I'm a little bit more mature and I have a better sense of where I am in this business, I do want to say that there are some drivers, right, that are really, really kind of changing the way we think about our post-COVID airport. And if you think about these sort of evolving factors. I think, typically you have the customers who are changing. And what we're seeing right now is obviously a huge transformation. The idea of leisure travel, right? This is business and leisure, maybe here to stay. If you think about it, in 2022, some analysis had indicated that the value of this sort of blended travel mode amounts to nearly 500 billion in 2022, and it's only going up. They say that a lot of people now in this sort of mixed mode of working have incorporated an element of leisure in their business travel, and we're certainly hearing that business travel is coming back, but it's not going to be the same anymore. So, I think that element of the traveler demographic is certainly going to impact the way we do work. And the next item for me is when I think about drivers is technology, right? As we're all well aware, technology is driving so much change. Obviously, pre-pandemic, there was no doubt in our mind, right, that technology, the Internet of Things, as well as even physically the evolution of aircraft technology, right? You think about eVTOL manufacturers that are still in the game. They're probably 150 plus, and eVTOL, for everyone listening in, if you're not aware, is electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, almost super cool flying cars, if you will. This is our reality, but that landscape is certainly driving the way we're thinking about the intermodal nature of the transportation of the airport environment. And if you go into a more micro level, I think the ability to make decisions and the ability to customize your journey is something that I think most travelers now are really being able to be empowered with that technology, all out of your smartphone, right? This alone will transform your most people's journeys today. So I think technology is definitely a big one. And the other factor is policy and regulatory direction, right? I think most of us know that we're going to be seeing smarter, faster, more sustainable airport developments moving forward. And I think it doesn't just make economic sense, right? But it is obviously where a lot of our businesses, a lot of our business partners, and where a lot of regulators are driving us. We are on a push for a net carbon environment, and particularly in the airport environment, where there is an accreditation program and there is a clear directive for airports to hit net zero in 2050. So I think those directions, as well as a lot of the policies, really kind of guiding us and putting in a force multiplier in diversity, equity, and inclusion, the way we design, has been one of the big drivers in the way we've been thinking about our airport facilities. So I think those are kind of the big drivers. And I think when you sum it up, Joe, just thinking about your demographic, at the airport, half of our travelers moving forward are going to be business travelers, and these are millennial business travelers, I want to emphasize, and baby boomers. They make up more than 50% of the traveling demographic. So you think about that, that changes everything. And then when you think about passengers with restricted mobility, these are people who are requiring special assistance as they travel. These folks account for, they've been stating numbers from 40 to 60 billion of spending power in travel over the pandemic. And so we're anticipating 33 million plus baby boomers by 2028 who's going to be requiring some form of special accommodation. Right. So when you just look at these sort of evolving, passenger trends alone, it's a lot for us to get our heads around, and without a doubt, this is going to change the way we think about our business.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear. Like, one thing I want to jump back to is that I think most people that have been in the aviation kind of world have seen, like, somehow whatever it is, and it's always a different event, like clockwork. Every 10 years, it's boom, boom. But every 10 years, you have a drop off in aviation, but then it always goes higher than where it peaked before. And so, yeah, I was curious to hear, like, see what you're hearing on, like, from the folks that you're working on your side. Because, like, pre-pandemic, it was like a lot of the big airports, they were seeing at least 50, if not more, business travel. And I think a lot of people post-pandemic were saying, like, yeah, our leisure is going to come back a lot faster than the business. But does it sound like they're gearing up to get back to that at least 50? Is what they're thinking is going to be that business travel versus leisure travel, or they're thinking leisure is actually going to be higher and in there?
Yeah,
well, they don't know, and it's going to be
exactly. Exactly. You know, it's a great question, and you know, it's going to be the $64 billion question, right?
Sure.
If you think about the spending power, you know, of these populations, it's going to be very interesting. You know, to my earlier point, I do feel like business travel is certainly coming back.
Yeah.
But it's going to be very, very different. There was a recent Expedia survey where I think it was about a third of medium and I should say small and large businesses have said that they've reinstated their 2019 pre-COVID business travel budgets.
Okay.
That being said, you know, there have been a lot of surveys, and we keep talking about these numbers. That's, I guess, we do a lot of that stuff at Gensler, right?
Yeah.
we definitely look at quote unquote megatrends, and what we're seeing is that, you know, there is no doubt that there's going to be a pivot in the next few years in terms of reduced spending or more stringent spending in business travel. And for full disclosure, you know, we in some of our regions are experiencing some contraction in our travel allowance. Now, to that end, though, there's also a clear indicator from a lot of recent surveys of the last couple of years as people have been recovering, especially kind of, I'll call it the post-Omicron trend, is that folks are recognizing that while they have to cut back in their spending, they're not compromising on quality.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing that we've been seeing. And when we talk about quality in the airport environment, there are a number of indicators. You know, when we talk about, you know, going back to your question about trends, Joe, you know, we're seeing premium travel come back up. Yeah. And again, these are folks who have we've been talking about these blended travelers. A lot of them are parking some personal time as well as putting in some personal money now on their business travel. Okay. So some of them might add an extra hotel day, or they might add a premium bump, you know, where company policy might say, hey, you know, it's less than 7 hours. I know that flight from, you know, to Honolulu, you know, would be nice. Sorry, Joe, we're not going to be able to cover your business travel expenses. So a lot of folks are actually looking into getting that lounge access, getting that better seat, and going for the premium travel experience. So we're definitely seeing that, and we're also seeing an uptick in health and wellness in that travel environment. So there's definitely, you know, to your previous question about whether business travel is coming back. You know, we think it's going to come back, but it's certainly going to be in a way that's going to be a balance of conservative spending and an emphasis on a quality experience. You know, better food, better experiences. You know, better productivity while you're in the airport environment. So this idea of following this sort of pattern of staying in line, queuing, you know, wasting an hour, you know, trying to get to your gate, that's not going to be acceptable anymore. And what we're seeing is that, you know, travelers, whether you're a business traveler or you're someone with a little bit more time, that quality of your experience is really going to be driving the way we design these facilities. Now, do we think that there's going to be a sustained uptick in the discretionary leisure traveler market? It is very, very likely. You know, we're seeing that a lot of the hybrid work is now here to stay. Sure. With that, it also means that we're going to see probably, again, less of the road warriors coming back. But when they're out, you know, again, it's going to be a focus on quality, and they're also going to be blending, you know, just like they're doing it in hybrid. There's going to be personal time, there's going to be business time, and it's really going to change the way we think about, you know, this sort of what's been historically sort of a very pre-programmed journey through the terminal.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I'm wondering too, because there's so much going on, like we see in a lot of our other markets when there's lack of unknown or lack of known, and people trying to build in flexibility because it's like, hey, we have to make a decision. The airport terminal needs to be built. Are you guys experiencing any of that? I mean, the aviation projects by far that we do, like, they're on very long time schedules. You know, I never thought something could be longer than a university project. So we started doing aviation, like, oh my gosh. So, you know, it's always interesting where they're like, especially on our side, like at an FF&E, it's being decided really early on to the point of like, well, you know, in the next year and a half, we're going to be launching some more product. You may want to consider like, no, we need to make a decision now. Are you trying to maybe build in more flexibility, or, you know, that's already kind of taken into consideration? You know, you've got such a variety of, like you said, mixed use spaces that, you know, maybe doesn't have to be as much of a consideration. I guess, how do you handle that?
Yeah, no, it's a perpetual problem for us. And in fact, we're in a number of large design build projects right now, Joe, as you well know, particularly on the West and the East Coast, where a lot of these procurement decisions, as you've noted, they have to be done fairly soon. And of course, the pandemic upended everything, right? This idea of knowing that you can densify seating, you can pack them all in. That, I think, you know, we've seen some really lasting changes, you know, coming out of COVID. That it isn't even just social distancing, right? It's about, to your point, how do you plan ahead for the you know, the known unknowns as well as the unknown unknowns, right?
Yeah.
So we know what social distancing looks like now, and I think a lot of your competitors and probably your design team has really been thinking about, you know, what the next pandemic is going to look like. But, you know, for us, you know, we're continuing to be asked by, you know, a lot of our stakeholders as to, you know, what is next? You know, how do you future-proof this, knowing that, you know, in a design build world, got to make those decisions, right? You got to, you know, is it a beam seating or is it not? So I will say that, you know, one of the lasting impacts, you know, that COVID has had on our practices, you know, you definitely want to anticipate that the idea of the old beam seating days where it's just rows and rows of seating has definitely gone away for a number of reasons, right? You know, we have people, you know, to our earlier discussion, you know, we're traveling for very different reasons. You know, not everyone's, you know, not everyone's just here for pleasure. Some people need to actually be productive. Some people need to work and be in a work bar. You know, that sort of diversity of uses and travel objectives. You know, I think that's here to stay. Knowing that you cannot predict a certain behavior. But what we're also seeing is that there are a lot of synergies that we can tap into in the gate environment. And, you know, I think a lot of developers and a lot of airport sponsors are encouraging our passengers to find different journeys that they can define for themselves, right? It might, in some places, it might be going through the adjacent retail facility or going to the bar that's right next to your gate. So a lot of those strategies have really helped us offload a lot of the traditional pressures of what happens when you do have another social distancing situation, or you have a flight cancellation and you have, you know, the 150 passengers stuck in that hold room that usually accommodates about 100 seats, right? So that ability to kind of anticipate a series of operational conditions, as well as understanding that, you know, it's the more people kind of move around, the more they can get better productivity with their time, spend a little bit more. A win-win situation is definitely what we're anticipating, knowing that you're right, technologies are going to change, social patterns are going to change. But we certainly know that the one thing that is very different, Joe, in our world and some of the other industries is that, you know, there's no hybrid travel, right? When you travel, it's all or nothing, right? So these bodies are going to be queuing up. So one of the things that we've really leveraged to future-proof our travel environment is leverage technology as an integral part. You know, we talk a little bit about you know, how aircraft are changing, you know, things are changing, but the way you travel and use that airport and the patterns have changed so much, you know, thanks to the ability to do everything on an iPhone. Right, the ability to also integrate your biometric information as you travel through the airport has really been a game changer. So I think airports are trying to really integrate, you know, the physical planning, you know, with obviously the building systems and the technology strategy to make sure that as they think about future proofing and evolve over the course of the 5, 10, 15 years of some of these projects. And for full disclosure, I've been involved in a project that is now, I'm trying to think, 2007, so it's 2013. So it's 16 years, and it is not officially opened yet. It's an unnamed airport project, an international project. And if you think about it, just think about the things in 2007. I think the iPhone came out in 2007, right? So imagine designing for the terminal of the future in 2007 and still going through operational testing today in 2023. I mean, what a transformation, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to have as much flexibility built in your terminal. And I would say also, when you look at FF&E, the ability to be flexible in creating systems that allow you to plug and play, right?
Yep.
The traditional beam seating model is great, but what happens if you throw in a beanie bag that has to have power? What happens if you have a work bar, for an environment that has become a destination for people who are in the leisure world? We have to have that robust infrastructure to accommodate for all of these lifestyle changes and seating pattern changes.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's interesting. One thing I want to circle back on, because you brought up health and wellness, and I think it's what's interesting about that topic is that one of the silver linings of the pandemic has shined a spotlight on that kind of component of design, architecture, infrastructure, whatever it may be. Because I remember we do this webinar, Designing Human Behavior, and I remember when I first started giving that over 7 years ago, I was like, well, why should we take into consider behavior? And why is that important? I'm like, well, it helps your mental health and wellness. And they're like, what is that? And like, that was a new topic back then. That's why I tell people coming out of the pandemic, I think we now have a greater appreciation and understanding that people don't want to sit right next to each other. There's like a behavioral element of that. And before, I think it was hard to get people over that hump with some of those things. And now that we're on the other side, like, I think people are more appreciative of that. But I wanted to see if you could expand on kind of that more, especially from the architecture and infrastructure side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, as the largest design practice in the world, we have a particular obligation, right, to really deliver and impact, the fight against climate change and to really deliver a more diverse, equitable, inclusive environment in everything with design, right? Whether it's a tabletop, or a gate holder. And I'm not going to take up airtime today to talk about our global cities challenge to eliminate, net zero emissions in our portfolio or strategies to end systemic racism in our A&D profession. But I do think that, when you talk about health and wellness, you talk about understanding that the traveler environment, or I would say the airport environment, is a truly diverse microsystem, right? Where if you think about it, the average customer only spends maybe 2.5 hours in a terminal on average. Sometimes if you're screwed on a flight delay, it could be a lot longer, as we've all experienced it.
Yes.
And I think the challenge for us is to recognize that the success of this ecosystem means that everyone is in it together. So folks who work there often spend 8, 10, 12 hours in that airport environment. So we really believe that, when we design these terminal facilities, it really is about designing a first-class experience for everyone. Whether you require special assistance as a young family, as many of us remember, carrying strollers, the bassinet, screaming spouse, all that good stuff, occasionally the dog. That environment, again, in this changing world, people vote with their wallets.
Yep.
If you design an airport that doesn't acknowledge this diversity of needs, you're in trouble. And so, on our end, when we think about diversity, we do have and many design firms today have a very robust inclusive design network, and we have a great one in our firm where we're developing everything from toolkits to really focusing on improving the inclusive design strategies in all of our projects. In some ways, it's like the ubiquity of ADA in the design process. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
If you kind of take that ADA playbook and say today that it's not a regulatory burden, but an expectation to comply, that's how we've been looking at a lot of our design projects, understanding that a healthy and an inclusive environment makes good business sense.
Yeah.
And as an example, we're currently working on a number of crew and support facility projects within our main terminals, where special attention has been really paid to the health and wellness of the crew per se. And as I mentioned earlier, these folks are spending 8+ hours a day in this environment. So, whether they're getting adequate daylighting in their work areas, or they're finding the appropriate touchdown spaces for managers to do some work, have, quick conferencing sessions with their, with their crew. All of these are critical, to their time at the airport. And obviously, we know the attrition rate in the airport environment is abysmally low. And we've had a lot of airline clients who've been really leading the industry and transforming the way we think about wellness. It's again, it's great to create these wonderful first class experiences for all. Right? And when we say first class for all, we literally mean that this entire vibrant ecosystem needs to be included in that conversation. So I think that piece is a little bit of a game changer for a lot of our clients. And this is where I kind of go back to how our firm is structured. And we do obviously have like many of our competitors, a wellness practice that cuts across all 29 practice areas, understands how to kind of transform everything from workspaces to hospitality areas, as well as obviously our aviation spaces, where we believe that there are a number of great projects that we don't have time to talk about, but I do want to say that one project that we're particularly proud of is our SFO Harvey Milk Terminal 1 project, which is the first Fitwel certified terminal in the world. And it's one of the few airports to go through that certification process to, again, to your point, to create a very healthy environment, not just for users, but for the, or I should say, not just for travelers, but for a lot of the working environments. And I think this is the beginning of what I think is a watershed moment in the way we think about a very healthy space in the airport world. We like to say that in the airport world, there's the above the wing world, and then there's the below the wing world. And I think a lot of our clients and our airline partners really understand the value of making the below the wing an equally incredible experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so you talk about making a first class experience for everybody. Do you see that airports are now kind of more receptive to that, especially, in certain situations where, to go into to choice of airports? I live in downtown Chicago, so I can go to Midway or O'Hare, and sometimes the experience may dictate that, which airport I prefer to fly to. But if I lived between O'Hare and Milwaukee, and I can get a similar flight, do you see airports starting to, I know about 5-6 years ago, a few years before the pandemic, it was like customer experience. And now I see that translating into like what you're saying here, first class experience for all. Do you see more buying into that to understand well, it's now you actually have you may be competing against another airport to.
Right. And I think it's even more of an existential challenge today. We have a major client of ours recently coming out of the pandemic, ran a visioning session with their board, asking themselves, if commercial air service is even in their future as an airport authority. So I think the world's changing fast. Going back to the theme of choices, with the competition amongst airports really at an all-time high. You're right. Within these regional airports, where people know that within an hour's drive, there are several airports at their disposal. It is an absolute challenge. But I think that in this hybrid world, where the essential question of, Chicago to meet with Joe Agati, to have a conversation and do this podcast, is no longer an expectation. Right now, we have choices. We can do this. Nothing obviously replaces the 3D experience, and we've had a couple of 3D experiences, although it's been a while. So I do feel like being able to be competitive, to be able to create an affordable experience for both the airlines who have to pay their rates and charges to operate in some of these brand new terminals, as well as to obviously create a very bespoke environment for the communities to really enjoy. That remains a challenge too. How do you keep airfares low? How do you keep operating costs reasonable? And knowing this competitive environment, and I've been able to work on both sides to see both the sponsor side, the agency side, as well as the airline side. I think we do have a real challenge here to make sure that this first class experience is something that is affordable and is sustainable. And I have a couple of examples of what I mean by this sort of first class experience. I think one of the things, Joe, when you talk about trends, what we're seeing is that a lot of airports are looking at the first class experience for all as speaking honestly about their community, creating really, really unique, bespoke experiences that really it's not necessarily opulent, but it's about really the integrity and the authenticity of that travel experience. If you go through New Orleans, you really want to, in that new terminal, you really want it all, right? You want to be able to get something, right, eat something, and experience it, whether it's the music or it's the outdoor experience. All of that, can you bring Bourbon Street into the terminal? Most airport sponsors would say, well, if I'm paying that kind of money, absolutely, right? Yeah. So for us, we've been really challenged to kind of create that sort of richness of the experience, and every touch point, whether it be FF&E, whether it be at the welcome center, the play areas, all of these need to speak to the region. And if we have time, I have one example that I'm really proud of, actually, that we recently completed. This sort of premium experience, we were told was not about, again, the opulence, right? It was about really kind of talking about the community and giving the travelers, particularly those who've never been there, a real sort of bespoke and impactful experience, and say, wow, I've been there. So, we going back to this airport, Munich Airport reached out to us and selected us in a competitive process to work on their interior design and their FF&E coordination for the new Terminal A at Newark Liberty International Airport. And it was a real experience, working with the branding strategist, the furniture integrator, the digital experience team, as well as the landscape architect, to really ensure that a very bespoke and unique New Jersey story could be amplified from the retail environment all the way to your gate. And so with that, it wasn't necessarily about expensive materials, right? It was really about, trying to make it memorable. And we had to integrate art, landscape, as well as geographic identity throughout this terminal design. And for us, it was, you couldn't forget the practical stuff, right? And what I mean is, the ability to charge your phone, right? The ability to within a reasonable distance, get to that nearest bar, get to that nearest concession amenity. And what we've seen is that diversity and accessibility is critical. And when I say diversity, I mean diversity of choices. And for us, there are two examples I wanted to share. We actually created a really interesting and co-created this design with the Munich Authority, as well as the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, to create an interesting program in this 1 million square foot terminal for local businesses to have a pop-up concession outlet. And these are revolving outlets that would allow businesses that normally would have seen the airport environment as a really difficult and high barrier to entry for a small mom and pop operation. So when you want to talk about really experiencing local ice cream or going to see some local artists, we were able to develop a concession concept to allow them in the very heart of the central core of the terminal
Yeah.
to go out there and experience it. So that's a plus for folks who otherwise would never be able to get to downtown Jersey, or I should say downtown Newark. And I think that those are the experiences that we think are really rich. And I think the other premium experience that we think has been really important in the design process was, thinking about how to translate a story about the geography and the diversity of New Jersey in our seating strategy. So the base building architect came up with a strategy where the center of the building, the head house, was the sort of urban core, and as you made your way out, you would kind of hit the natural landscapes and end up at the Jersey Shore at the end of the experience. So that selection of the appropriate furnishings, the different landscape species that talk about seagrasses all the way to the pine barrens of New Jersey were all really captured throughout the journey through this terminal. So for us, the combination of seating, carpet selection, landscape, and the digital integration really spoke a very unique story that we're hoping to also parlay that to some of our ongoing work with some of the other Port Authority terminals that we're working on now.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, it's it's really kind of fascinating examples at the Newark Airport with this kind of equity and inclusion. That's obviously a popular kind of we'll call it trend or that's going on right now, kind of through a lot of different markets. Are you seeing airports kind of more receptive of that? Like, I feel like in the past, it was very common to see like smaller airports definitely like be much stronger reflections of the community. Sometimes you didn't always pick that up in the larger airports. Are you seeing that across the board, people are trying to put more efforts and emphasis on equity, inclusion, diversity kind of in the space now?
Yeah, we're really proud to be working on some very large Port Authority projects where whether it's an airline piece or it's directly for a developer or the Port Authority, the involvement of the community in the design process is one that is, they set a pretty high bar for local participation. So we're really proud that we've been able to go to the our communities here in New Jersey, as well as out in Queens, where some of our larger Port Authority JFK projects are, and really build and weave local teams into our design process. So that's been something that I would say is increasingly mainstream. If you think about inclusion of not just thinking about designing for everybody, right? It's about making sure that everyone is in the design. And that's been a very exciting part of it. So, we're working on a project right now, at JFK, the new Terminal 1 facility, which is the first phase is a 1.7 million square foot development for 15 gates. And we've had at various times about 175 to 200 colleagues working on this project. And a good portion of them are local design partners. So we have 3 local New York design firms that would represent an underrepresented demographic participating in our process. And to your original question, I think this is becoming a lot more mainstream, but also one that really delivers a richer project. All of these big projects from SFO to Columbus to JFK and Newark, it takes a village, but it also takes a diversity of thought and the sort of platform to share ideas, recognizing that for people to kind of to believe it, they have to see it. And it's that sort of discourse where you're designing for all sorts of different people, because you have so many different people from so many different backgrounds working on these projects. So as a project manager, who grew up in Honolulu, who was born in Hong Kong, who lives in Boston, who works, everywhere, it's an exciting moment for me to be part of that dialogue. And I think we're going to see increasingly, back to your question about what about, how big airports deliver this. I think big airports, are complex, and they also report to a very complex structure right? Whether it's an authority, whether it's a developer, whether it's some sort of airline consortium. I think that is I would consider it, as many of them said, that this sort of diversity component is just the floor, right? It is just an expectation that you're an integral part of this sort of community conversation.
Yeah, interesting. I want to go back to one thing you touched on earlier. We were talking about technology, and beyond you keep saying floor, beyond the bare minimum of like, hey, we need power, access to power, probably access to internet. What else do you see in airports taking advantage of technology? Like one example that with Seattle Airport, they've been experimenting with this early arrival or booking your check-in time that you can go through security. And it's been an interesting kind of experiment. It was, we had Dawson, the head of their facilities, on one of the podcasts, and I'm like, oh, someone like that, me, I'm like, I wouldn't call me a nervous traveler, but I am a high anxiety traveler. My wife is a very patient woman. I am the person that every year I get more and more like, hey, we got to leave this much earlier. Like when I'm 60, I'm going to be like at the Hilton across from O'Hare 2 days ahead of time, so I don't miss my flight. So you can't. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, and I have like pre-check and all this other stuff. It's like, and I still have these issues. Like it's my own mental thing.
Totally.
Are you seeing, airports, take advantage of this, like, big data, tech kind of, components to help with the first class experience, all these other things? How are they maybe integrating that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think a lot of these discussions were already, I think they're already in full throttle pre-COVID.
Okay.
And I think after COVID, it only accelerated the preeminence of technology as an ability to, one, improve the passenger experience, two, optimize operations, and three, I think it continues to really enhance choice as part of that journey. What's also important is we also have to remember that there is an analog component, right? Talking about being a more elderly traveler, we have to basically future-proof that journey and make sure that it can also be a totally analog experience that's enabled by technology. Yes. So when I talk about the post-COVID enablers, this idea of a completely frictionless experience is going to be a really big deal in travel. And, I think in pre-COVID, one of the major integrators in airport technologies did a survey, and I think about maybe 49% of the travelers surveyed were kind of interested in technology, weren't really willing to risk their personal information like biometrics and scanning stuff.
Sure.
Now, 2 years into COVID, they went back to the survey, and 3/4 of those surveyed now are absolutely happy and more than willing to share their personal information to expedite the journey. And one of the cool things about technology here, particularly when it comes to biometrics, is it is about accuracy, right? Yeah. And what we're seeing is that the agencies, the airlines are all really embracing the ability to be a lot more accurate in the journey using biometrics. So as an example, the TSA had beta tested one of the first truly biometric international terminals in Atlanta. And at Hartsfield-Jackson International, they developed an integrated, fully biometric experience from curb to gate, meaning that you can enter the checkpoint by simply showing your face, right? That is the most accurate boarding pass. No one else can have that boarding pass. So that information, it's great to see that the TSA and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection agencies are all embracing, this biometric piece of the travel experience. And what we're also seeing and implementing, if you travel through Newark and eventually at some of the JFK terminals, you will see that these biometric portals will be a part of the entire journey. From the moment you check in, drop off your bags, and go to your checkpoint, all you do is you show your face and you continue on, literally from your doorway to your jetway. This technology will really create that seamless experience. And again, this is something that pre-COVID, it was a nice to have. And in this world where social distancing may be essential, one can truly have a seamless journey without contacting anybody or without engaging anybody. What's also really powerful about the biometric journey is that it could also improve your commercial aspects of the journey. You know, someone could go into a lounge, without having to fumble through your boarding pass, et cetera. Again, you show your face, and you go right into your lounge. I think more ubiquitously, you're seeing the Amazon just go technology for retail experiences. So you can imagine, with that sort of biometric integration, it is a fairly seamless experience, and we're definitely seeing that in a lot of our projects in this post-COVID landscape. So I think it's from a more analog point of view, I think what we're seeing is the overarching regulatory guidance, right, to deliver these healthier, more resilient and accessible travel environments. And technology can certainly help us. And I think on a broader lens, technology like sustainable aviation fuels, right? All of these things are actually creating much more healthier, lower carbon environments. And at the end of the day, I think all of this combined is creating healthier, smarter, and cleaner travel experiences for everybody. So we're pretty excited to be in the midst of all this. And I think in the future, you're going to see even more options. And again, because we can't do hybrid travel, all this has to be real. And technology is not the end. It's really an enabler to allow us to really have a better travel experience.
Interesting. Well, Derrick, this has been a really fascinating and illuminating conversation. Just in kind of wrapping it up here, I usually like to ask people to close with words of encouragement, words of wisdom that you may be able to impart on us.
Oh, geez. But words of encouragement. I want to first say that I've been really fortunate to see all these various aspects of the business. From airline, airport, consultant, planner, engineering, and designer points of views. It's been it's been really an exciting 2-decade journey here. And when I left school, I intentionally went into the aviation consulting world. I just wanted to take a break from architecture, and invariably I was brought back in. But what I experienced as an airline consultant was just a sort of multifaceted perspective of these different and often divergent interests. And what I've seen and have been very encouraged in the last couple of years in the wake of COVID is how collaborative we've been as an aviation industry. Yeah. And whatever side you're on, at the end of the day, passengers do vote with their wallets. Yeah. And in order to ensure that they come back to our airports, I'm seeing just an incredibly positive industry collaboration and synergy that, as we recover together to restore confidence to the traveling public, it's been just really great to see how integrated we are as an industry. With a confluence of a set of policy, technology, and evolving customer demographics, we're really poised to deliver a product that in the next few years that will really rise up to the challenges of our generation. And as a designer, we're in this incredible moment of transformation where the intertwining of the industry and the solutions that are at our disposal, right, will really kind of deliver these game-changing opportunities for both travelers and the airport population. So in closing, I just want to say that, folks, keep climbing in this incredible journey together, because we are better together, and it's been just an incredible ride. So, onwards to new frontiers.
Yeah, well, those are very good words of wisdom. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continue working with you all and pushing the boundaries of this business, because they're really, sky's the limit here.
Yeah, there's a lot of great opportunity out there. Well, I really appreciate the time today. This has been great.
Excellent. All righty. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.